Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first MTGA educational webinar. We're going to continue to do these every month for the next few months for the foreseeable future. This is something we do when there's a lot going on in the industry, particularly when it comes to high path. And typically during these webinars, we end with Dr. Shauna Voss giving us an update from the Board of Animal Health. But since this is our first one, we thought we would start with Dr. Voss. So she will be kicking off this webinar. If you do have any questions, please use the question and answer box to type them in, or feel free to hit raise your hand on the screen. And I think we can get started. So welcome, Dr. Voss.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we can.
All right. So I think we were all probably hoping that we could get this first webinar in before we had any high path cases, and that has obviously not been the case. I'm assuming you guys are all getting the disease alerts and are aware of the situation, at least on the periphery. So this is just a quick summary slide of how many cases we have. As a reminder, this is an ongoing outbreak that started back in 22. So our confirmed case tally just keeps rising, and we're currently at 190 confirmed cases. There are 2 additional presumptive positives that are pending confirmation, and you should receive those disease alerts. Just kind of a reminder of how we got here. We had a few cases last fall and into the early part of 2025, but we were able to self-declare freedom from high path in poultry back in March. So March 28th, we had our freedom date. We had one last quarantine, so we had a backyard flock that was still under quarantine, and that quarantine was released on August 21st, which meant that our high path event in Minnesota was final and closed out and resolved. And unfortunately, that lasted just under a month, and we had our first confirmed high path case this fall. Just a reminder of where you can kind of track where we're at with cases. We do have a dashboard on our Board of Animal Health website. If you go to the high path avian influenza web page, you'll find our dashboard, and you'll also find the current map with control areas. And you can't necessarily zoom in real closely, but there is a feature on this map where you can type your address in, and it lets you know if you are in a buffer zone, an infected zone, or a surveillance zone, or hopefully in a free zone. So just remember that that is a resource for you guys. And unfortunately, we're not in this alone. We're starting to see cases kind of across the United States pop up. This is the national situation that I pulled off the USDA website this morning. The map on the top of the left-hand side of the screen there is commercial cases. And so that's kind of focused right now on the upper Midwest, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota. But if you include all of the cases, that includes even our backyard flocks, then you can see we've got a lot more states that are involved with it. So there's been 21 confirmed flocks in the last 30 days across the United States. I wanted to spend some time this morning talking about or reminding you about the USDA interim final rule that relates to the biosecurity compliance audit program. And I suspect that Stefan will cover this as well in her talk today, but I think it's maybe okay if you hear it from both of us because unfortunately we're having to implement this rule and implement some of these audits with now new control areas in place. So just as a reminder, the compliance program, or we call it the BCAP program, requires biosecurity audits for those in the buffer zone who would like to place poultry. So that buffer zone, as a reminder, is that 3 to 10 kilometer zone around an infected prem. Nothing has changed within that infected zone. Unfortunately, if you want to be eligible for indemnity, you are still not allowed to place birds within that infected zone. This interim rule then also requires the infected premises undergo a restock biosecurity audit prior to placement, and those premises must undergo that audit every 6 months until the state declares freedom. And so that's kind of that reminder why I put in there when we declared freedom back in March. That kind of cleared it out for anybody who had had that BCAP audit early in the year. And so again, these audits are a little bit different than what have been done in the past. There's a few different players that need to be involved in it. All of the audits have to be conducted by an auditor who has attended a USDA-led training program. And that includes both the auditor and the audit reviewer, which are both required folks to participate within this audit. So Minnesota right now has 10 people that are trained to conduct these audits with some caveats. 6 of those 10 people are actually case managers. So if those individuals are out working on infected farms, obviously they're busy doing that, and they wouldn't be helping with these audits. But for the restock audits for the infected parameters, those individuals would probably be the ones out on the farms conducting those audits. We have 3 people in Minnesota who are trained as the audit reviewer, and this is a required federal veterinary medical officer has to do this final audit review. And so we've got 3 of those folks here in Minnesota. If needed, we can pull into some national staff to get those final reviews conducted as well. And then as we've done in the past, we've got 2 folks that are trained that are primary auditors for the buffer zone placements. But what we're discovering, and we discovered real fast this week, that 2 people may not be enough. These audits are much more time consuming than the previous audits that we used to do for HiPath. And so we've had to pull in some of the case managers to help with these audits and just keep that process moving. So again, this slide, hopefully you guys have seen this slide before, but just a reminder, this is a new audit tool that we use for our biosecurity audits. So this is not the same as our NPIP audits. It's not the same audit tool that we used for previous outbreaks within HiPath. This is a new audit tool, and the outcome is either pass or there's remediations needed. All sections, all questions of this audit form must be marked as a pass in order for that audit to pass. And there's 3 sections, and the bulk of these audits are really a review of your written biosecurity plan. There's 7 parts to it, and it's just a paper-based audit, right? So we're looking to see that your biosecurity plan addresses all of the questions that are in that audit tool. Section 2 is a review of paperwork, and so we're going to be looking at training records and movement certificates and things like that. And I've got information available to you guys if you want to talk further about this. We can take that certainly offline. And then section 3 is the visual verification of the farm-specific biosecurity. So that's probably what you guys remember from years past, where we're conducting those usually over Microsoft Teams, sometimes over FaceTime. The infected zone and audits do need to be conducted in person. So how can you prepare and get ready for one of these BCAP audits? So I was disappointed this week to hear some folks say, well, I passed one of these before, so I'm good, right? And the answer is probably no. There's things that you need to be doing now in order to make sure that you're ready to go in case you end up in a buffer zone and have a placement already scheduled. So you folks need to be looking at your biosecurity plan, comparing it against the audit tool, and making edits to it so that you are prepared. And that QR code that's on your screen there, if you want to pull your phone out real quick and grab a snapshot of that, that is sorry, I guess that is not the audit tool, but this will take you to the resources at the USDA that Stefan will probably cover, but you can find the audit tool on there as well. But I'm also going to encourage you guys to take advantage of some of the biosecurity assessments that are available. And I know Dr. Schaefbauer and Jason are going to cover these in more detail, but especially that biosecurity incentive focused assessment, that's the BIFA. It uses the exact same audit tool that we will use for the BCAP audits. It's available to all commercial poultry operations not already affected by HiPath. And having one of these audits conducted will assess your readiness for future audits. And most importantly, once you have a BIFA audit done, it's good for 6 months. So if you have an audit done today through the BIFA program, you're good until probably February. So if you end up in a control zone, you do not need to have another audit conducted. And then, of course, the wildlife biosecurity assessments that I know a lot of you have taken advantage of. It's a great program. Jason will cover that in a little bit more detail later on.
We do have a note in the chat or in the Q&A from Jake that the QR code is not working. It's taking to a editor website.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully all of these are not incorrect, but I can certainly get you that information afterwards. But thanks for double checking that. So just to assess your readiness, I had some people this week already said, well, I just had my NPIP audit, so I should be fine with this. And the answer is probably no. Uh, the audit tool that we use to conduct an NPIP audit is not the same as what's being done for the BCAP audit. There's less detail with the questions. And so just because you've passed an NPIP audit doesn't mean you're ready for a BCAP audit. So take a look at your plan and get those updated. For those of you who have had the high path buffer zone placements in the past, you think I passed those, not a problem. I should be just fine with this one as well. Well, maybe not, right? Because we still need to look at your written biosecurity plan, and it still needs to meet all of those points that are in that new audit tool. So just because you've passed an audit in the past doesn't mean that you're ready for another audit right now. And there's a handful of you guys who have actually had a BCAP audit done in 2025. And for those of you, you guys are rock stars. I know it's a painful process. It's challenging to kind of understand what all is expected of you. So please share your experience and help out your colleagues and your neighbors to make sure that we as a state are ready to do these. And then from here, I'll give a couple quick updates on the laboratory side of things. Just a reminder about our testing schedules. I know most of our samples come into the MPTL for testing, but the VDL is certainly there as a backup for testing. The normal testing schedule for avian influenza right now is Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. So we need all samples to the lab by 11 a.m. to be included in that run. We will accommodate some emergency testing as needed. We try to consolidate that to just one extra run if we have to do it, but those do require approval by the board. And so check in with me if you've got sick birds, high mortality, something that might need that emergency testing. And then the VDL in St. Paul is available to do that sick bird testing as well. They are not doing control area or permitted movement testing at this time. But we are certainly keeping our tabs on the situation, and we'll decide if any of that needs to change. As far as weekend testing, Saturday testing will go to the VDL in St. Paul. Sunday testing will go to the MPTL in Wilmer. If anybody is in need of permitted movement testing because you're in a control zone, please make sure that you're reaching out to the laboratory within enough time if possible so that we can make sure that we've got somebody scheduled and on call in order to be able to do that. And then just as a reminder, if you have sick birds, please get 3 samples per barn from that affected flock to bring to the lab for testing. So we did have a case where we picked up a really, really, really high CT off of 1 of 3 samples. And we tested that flock and it was very positive the next day. So those 3 samples are really important, especially for an early detection. I want to send a special welcome to Dr. Barbara Semenova. She's the new veterinary pathologist at the University of Minnesota that will be working in avian programs. And so she is originally from Los Angeles, California, recently finished up a veterinary pathology residency at the University of Florida and is very excited to move north here to Minnesota. She's got a pretty diverse background in both veterinary medicine and pathology, but she does have a special interest in infectious disease and avian pathology. And so we're very excited to have her as part of the team, and hopefully you guys will get an opportunity to meet her soon and get her out into the field to kind of find out what you guys do and find out how she can be of service. I did include her contact information on this slide. And lastly, I just want to send a reminder about how to use barcodes. The lab's reporting that they're seeing a lot of misuse of barcodes or incorrect application of the barcode labels. So just a reminder, unfortunately, these barcode labels come in a set of 4s. We're only going to use 2 of them per sample. So 1 sticker goes on your tube, the second sticker goes on your submission form, and then the last 2 stickers need to be discarded. They don't go on any other samples. And then you get a new set of 4 stickers to apply to the remaining tubes that you have. If they're labeled incorrectly, the lab has to relabel them once they get admitted for submissions. And then hopefully this QR code works. This is just a quick video that we made a few years ago about how to fill out that high path avian influenza submission form. So if it's been a long time since you had to do this, go ahead and look that one up online. It's a short video. It doesn't take long, but it's a good reminder for how to get those samples submitted to the laboratory properly. And with that, that is my update. Happy to take any questions that we've got.
All right, thank you, Dr. Voss. Do we have any questions from the attendees? I am not seeing any. So I think thank you again, and we will welcome Dr. Schaefbauer to go into a little bit more depth on those biosecurity audits.
Yes. And how does that look on your end?
Looks very good, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you all. I'm Stefan Schaefbauer with USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. So happy to be here with you today. I'm really glad Dr. Voss went. She took a different approach to the BCAP, and I'm really grateful because I'm not going into that much detail. I'm more so wanting you all to know the difference between each of the incentive programs and then how you might sign up for what we call the BIFA. It's a lot of assessment and audits, and so let's talk a little bit about that. And so, I mean, we've been battling HPI since, well before I came to Minnesota as ABIC, so back in 2015. And during all those outbreaks, USDA has continued to do studies through our epidemiology reports. And biosecurity is a really important factor in helping farms not get HPI. And a lot of those, the most impactful measures are those protective measures in these reports include keeping rodents away from feed sources, requiring your farm personnel to change clothes and shoes, cleaning and disinfecting shared vehicles and equipment. And so with that, as Dr. Voss mentioned, at the end of 2024, some additional biosecurity audit requirements came about. Now, and then shortly after that, you had the Biosecurity Incentives Program. And so that incentives program was meant to address gaps on commercial farms, in hopes to help producer enhance their measures of biosecurity. There's a cost share, and so it's more than just finding out what the gaps may be, but USDA under our Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Rollins, created a cost share program where USDA would cover up to 75% of the cost. Now, that cost is based on your inventory of birds. And so it can be as little as $2,500 maximum to $25,000. And so it's really depending on the size of the farm. But USDA would cover up to 75% with the producer covering 25%. Reimbursements would be made after the eligible audit or assessment, and it occurs after key biosecurity measures are addressed. And this is where, and Dr. Voss touched on these, you primarily have three types of assessments. And so you have the wildlife biosecurity assessment, which Wildlife Services will talk about here in a bit. You have that biosecurity incentive focused assessment. And one thing I want that really makes that one stand out, and I talked about it on the last slide, is that there's a cost share to doing those remediations, and it's voluntary. Whereas the mandatory audits or the BCAPs, those biosecurity compliance audit program, that one is mandatory and it's required before you're allowed to restock if you're in if you're HPA positive or you're in a or you're moving into a buffer zone. And these are required in order to qualify for indemnity. And so once again, we touched on this, but the biosecurity compliance audit, the BCAP that Dr. Voss was talking about, is available to commercial poultry premises that intend to move poultry onto the premises after they're either HPI infected or located in a control area buffer zone. And so she's talked about that, but this one is mandatory. And so if you find yourself in that control area, it has to be done in order for you to move birds into that area and be eligible for indemnity. And successfully passing those puts you in compliance for 6 months, which Dr. Voss mentioned as well. Then you have the biosecurity incentive focused assessment. Those are available to poultry premises with more than 500 birds. And so farms that are below that aren't subject to the BCAP requirements. And so this one again is the cost share program, and successfully passing the assessment by completing all the required biosecurity remediations puts you in BCAP compliance. And so Dr. Voss mentioned this, but it's worth mentioning again that if you decide to sign up for the BIFA, you can have the tool done, and then those remediations that you find, you can get reimbursement for meeting them, and then you wouldn't, if it's within the 6-month time frame, you wouldn't have to do the BCAP, which means it might not, if you're in a control area, it wouldn't slow placement of birds onto your property because you've already done it. The other thing too is if you're doing a BCAP and you have remediations that have to be done, those are done and there's no cost share. And so that's another benefit of getting it done ahead of time. This last program, the Biosecurity Supplemental Improvement Proposal, this one is essentially for, say you're a farm and you did the BCAP and you've taken care of your remediations, but you want to go a bit further. There's something more you want to do, even though you've passed your audits. This is essentially a grant program that would provide you additional funding to do other biosecurity projects. And so the idea of this one was USDA didn't want to feel like those producers who are already doing everything that needs to be done didn't get some type of incentive for doing even more. And so that's what this program is about. So the assessment process, if you're interested in signing up for the voluntary assessment, and that's that biosecurity incentive focused assessment or BIFA, you can call this number or email poultry.biosecurity@usda.gov. Those are being managed on a nationally, and so someone would call you and get you enrolled in the program. When you're emailing that email address, just make sure you provide your premises name, your prem ID, your address, city, state, things like that. And then for the mandatory audits, that will happen like we have a process in state for how we go about those. I thought it'd be interesting to share that as of September 15th, 1,293 poultry biosecurity assessments have been completed. And so 651 of those are the wildlife biosecurity assessments. and 642 are the domestic biosecurity assessments completed on poultry farms. And so that's where we are. I would say in Minnesota, we've probably had about 12 farms sign up so far. With, as you can see, the bulk of the farms are that have signed up in the program are in Iowa and Ohio so far. And though that is it for me, unless there's questions. And one thing that I forgot to mention is that the biosecurity incentive, the BIFA and the BCAP use the same audit tool. And so when we share out the links to the audit tool with you guys, you'll have access to both the link to the main dashboard as well as the audit tool itself, so that you can start preparing.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Schaefbauer. Do we have any questions from the group? I'm not seeing any hand raised or any open questions in the Q&A. Right. So I'll say thank you again, Dr. Schaefbauer, and I will welcome Jason Gilsdorf to talk more in detail about the wildlife biosecurity audits.
Yeah, hello, and thank you for inviting me to participate. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. Yeah, so if you've been through these before, you've probably seen some of this information I'm going to present here, but I did want to provide a little bit of a review and some updates for the Wildlife Biosecurity Assessment Project here in Minnesota. So I am with USDA Wildlife Services. And a big distinction, I would say, with Wildlife Services is we are a non-regulatory agency, so we do not enforce any rules or make any rules or anything like that. We provide technical assistance, and we can also provide direct control. And technical assistance is recommendations. Direct control is actually active management out in the field, and we'll discuss a little bit about more of those here as we move forward. So, quick review with the Wildlife Biosecurity Assessment Project here in Minnesota. As Dr. Schaefbauer just mentioned, this is a completely voluntary program or thing to be involved with. There are no charges for the Wildlife Biosecurity Assessment Project. It's free to producers. You'll notice an asterisk there. I'm going to discuss that here in just a minute. The WBA consists of three components. It's an assessment of the farm, which includes the barns and the property itself, looking for attractants. The second component is a series of surveys. So we do a wildlife abundance survey, which is that WAS, where we're identifying and documenting any wildlife, birds, mammals, anything we see on the farm. We also do a mammal survey, and a mammal survey is at night. So that starts roughly about an hour after sunset to roughly an hour before sunrise. So it's nighttime. We have thermals that we go out and on the farm, and we're identifying any mammals that we would see. The third component is a direct control component, and that includes our non-lethal work and also any lethal work that would be appropriate. So we'll discuss more of those here just as we move forward. But non-lethal things are like we have handheld lasers that we'll carry with us when we're out there. If we see some wildlife, we'll disperse those with lasers. We'll clap our hands or walk towards them. We'll disperse the birds, and that's a physical harassment. Lethal control could include a pellet rifle. I would say the pellet rifle is probably one of our main tools that we use for direct control, but we also have traps that we can use to manage the wildlife. And we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. So a few updates. If you remember, back when the WBA program started, it was a pilot project, and it included 4 states. It was Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and Iowa. That pilot project is now over, and the WBA project has gone national. So the new administration rolled that out here earlier this spring. Our leadership is asking us, and they're kind of pushing us towards performing all three components of the WBA project at farms. So that includes the assessment of the barns and the property, looking for hazards or attractants, the surveys, the wildlife abundance surveys and the mammal surveys, and also conducting direct control. They would like us to conduct all three of those at the farms if possible. A reimbursement agreement is something that is a new part of the program, and Dr. Schaefbauer was just talking about that. She did a good job discussing that and explaining that. So originally, when we first started, farms were asked to sign that reimbursement agreement. A new change now recently is a reimbursement agreement is not required for a producer to get a WBA. However, now if that producer is interested in participating in veterinary services reimbursement programs, then a reimbursement agreement is required. And that agreement is between the producer and veterinary services. So now to that asterisk I discussed here a little bit ago. Our leadership is asking us if after we do 3 assessments of the farm, and an assessment, a wildlife biosecurity assessment of looking for hazards is conducted every 3 months, so quarterly. If after 3, we are not observing any kind of mitigations, any kind of repairs or remediations to the hazards we identify, we are being asked to stop going to that farm. It's basically the free service is over. Now, if that producer would like us to continue to go to that farm, but they don't want to fix any of the hazards that we're identifying, then that producer would be asked to pay for the services on wildlife services, service that we provide. So as long as folks are mitigating, fixing some of the hazards or the hazards that we identify, then this will remain a free service, no charge to producers. The last thing I want to just brief is, and I'm going to talk about this more here in a minute, but if we do not have any wildlife services personnel within the area of the farm, we may not be able to offer consistent direct control or the surveys. What we can do at a minimum, however, is provide that wildlife biosecurity assessment, and we can provide a report that would identify any hazards and then provide recommendations on how to mitigate those hazards. So since the project has started, and remember, we were a part of that pilot project back in 2023, in the fall of 23 is when we started. We have assisted 75 individual poultry farms in the state. I have 11 producers here. Dr. Schaefbauer just mentioned 12, and she's actually right. That just ticked up here by 1. So we are up to 12 as far as even with the Wildlife Biosecurity Assessment project, we're helping 12 producers now. Currently, because of the situation with our personnel, you can see this map on the right here. There's 6 of us right now on the Wildlife Biosecurity project here in Minnesota. And those are our locations basically where we're located. Given the 5 folks that are actually actively out in the field and the number of farms that they can work, we're currently working roughly 24 individual prems. That number fluctuates every so often, just with the number of farms that one person can handle and consistently work. And that includes 6 different producers. Not going to lie, we've had some challenges over the last few years. If anybody's been watching the news recently, there's a lot of uncertainty with the government. There were times that we went to bed and we didn't know if we were going to have a job when we woke up. In addition to that, we are still in a hiring freeze. So we are looking to expand and grow this project. The hiring freeze makes it very challenging for us to not be able to hire additional personnel. We have had a couple exemptions there where we are allowed to hire 1 or 2 employees. Another challenge with that is we have had very few applicants for those positions. So we're having a tough time finding some personnel. But given that, we still are doing a great job here in the state. We've been able to really help any producer that has asked for our help. So I mentioned some direct control, and I did mention a pellet rifle is one of our main tools that we use. I wanted to talk real quickly about some other options here. We do have a couple of different kinds of traps that we can use to catch wildlife. So, we have cage traps and that kind of things that we can use for mammals, but I wanted to focus a little bit here on some of the bird traps. We do have a starling trap, and it's a trailer trap that's pulled behind a vehicle. It's pretty good size, so you can see We can catch hundreds of European starlings at a time in a trap like this. On the right, we have a pigeon trap. So both of these traps have food and water in them. So the birds can, they can survive for quite a while in these traps. However, we still do frequently check these traps. We have another trap called a sparrow trap that's quite a bit smaller. It's for catching house sparrows and smaller birds. Water is not able we can't fit a water container in that. So we do frequently, at least probably once a day, we check those sparrow traps. But all of our traps are checked quite frequently, and we remove those birds as appropriate.
Jason, we do have a question in the Q&A, and that
Okay.
is, does the WBA flow over to the BIFA if the owner consents to it?
That might be a question for Dr. Schaefbauer. I'm not sure how to answer that. Dr. Schaefbauer, can you answer that?
Yeah, they both, well, they used to use the same form and you checked which one you wanted. And so, I mean, really you could, but now, Jason, you said, do they still use that form to sign up, but they just don't have to do an additional contract is what you were saying?
So there's a form that I think it's essentially the same one that you're using, and I think on that form they get to select which program they want to participate in. So
Yeah.
if I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so for the enrollment form, if you sign up and say you initially said you only wanted the WBA, then you could just resubmit it. It'd be the same form and check off the BIFA.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Schaefbauer. So yeah, the different programs are separate. So when the producer signs up, they can check which ones they want to enroll in. In terms of wildlife services, we are specifically only doing that wildlife biosecurity assessment project. So when we see a request come through and we see that WBA on there, those are the ones that wildlife services that we grab and that we make contact with the producer to establish and coordinate us coming to the farm. So any separate one, they would be separate from the wildlife biosecurity assessment. Any other questions?
Not right now. You are clear to continue.
Okay. Alrighty. So in addition to the direct control that we're doing at farms, if we have wildlife in hand, we will sample those. So whether it's a clean farm or a hot farm that has broke with high-path AI, we will collect samples if we are able to do that and we have birds in hand. So our efforts so far for this calendar year, this just ticked up here in the past couple days, actually. We've so far collected 152 samples. 119 of those are oral cloacals. We just did send a new batch in here a couple days ago, so we have quite a few pending out there. But that QCF, that means that the samples were not able to run, so they could not determine if they were presumptive positive or if they were negative. So they were basically, something went wrong somewhere. Doesn't necessarily mean a quality thing, but it just wasn't able to determine to run that sample. We have not found any positives at this point. We still do have 25 out there pending, however. But in addition to those 119 oral cloacal swabs, we have 33 blood samples. So we just sent another big batch off of those too, and you can see there are quite a few pending on those. The 152 samples includes 26 different species. The top 3 are house sparrows, rock pigeons, or your just common city pigeons, and then barn swallows are the top 3 that we've sampled so far. Those samples have been collected over 9 different prems in 9 different counties. So we will continue to sample wildlife as we have them in hand, and we are able to do that, to do those things. So real quick, I just wanted to kind of discuss a little bit of a summary of the assessments themselves. So our reports that we generate, we send those to producers, and they will have these maps like this. Since the program has gone national, there has been a huge standardization procedure that we are all using the same icons to identify the different hazards. So the main issues or hazards that we are identifying are compromise exclusion. I would say that's probably number one. We do observe a lot of open holes in the walls or in the foundations where wildlife could access poultry right inside the barns. And there's oftentimes attractants on site that we will identify.
Jason, we do have a question going back to the samples that you collected. Is there an opportunity to test for avian metapneumovirus on those collected samples?
So at this time right now with Wildlife Services, our samples go to a specific lab out in Fort Collins. And at this time, we are only looking for high path AI. I'm not sure if they are saving those to do additional screenings in the future, but at this time right now, we are just looking at avian influenza. So I know folks can probably visualize what we're talking about here, but I wanted to show some examples of when we show up to a farm, we look at things through different eyes. We look very fine detail, and we're not trying to be picky. This is what we're trained to do. Essentially, if we see a hole or a gap in something that's over 1 inch, that's big enough for a house sparrow to get through. So we're going to identify anything that's over 1 inch in size and identify that as a hazard. That picture on the left there, you can see that wire mesh. There's a portion of that mesh that's a little bit bigger. That's absolutely sufficient for a house sparrow to pass through. Anything that's basically 1.5 inches or bigger, now European starlings can get through those. So on the right, we have the louvers on a fan, and the louvers are basically oftentimes they're serving as the exclusion device to keep wildlife from getting through that fan area. When the fan's not operating, the louvers often are closed. However, we do see fairly common where wires are ran through those louvers. Now that's going to keep one of those louvers open and therefore allow a potential access point for wildlife. So I'm not showing the big obvious pictures here. I'm showing kind of some smaller things that most people may not look at and say, well, what's the problem with that? When we look at things like that, we can absolutely see how wildlife could use those as access points. So looking at some different kinds of holes and issues in the walls, the picture on the left there is pretty obvious where something's going through that auger there's going through that wall. That's big enough. I mean, gosh, a pigeon could probably get through something like that. The middle picture and the picture on the right, we have some sheet metal that's bent. And with the feces that's on the wall there, that's direct evidence that there are birds accessing those areas. Now, I will say one thing that we don't do when we're doing a hazard or assessment is we do not go inside the barns, and we do not look inside these holes. So maybe there's a hole and maybe the animal can't get all the way inside the barn to where the poultry are, but we don't investigate that. If birds or if animals are getting through that exterior wall, we're going to identify that as a hazard because maybe they can get into the barn by going through that. Maybe there's something on the other side that they can't get through, but we don't know that. We're still going to document that as a potential hazard. Some different breaches in foundation issues. Again, we look pretty small. So Dr. Schaefbauer was talking about rodents and mice. You know, if a mouse can get its head through something, the rest of its body can fit. So mice can get through incredibly small holes. So that center picture there looks like a pretty small hole in the foundation, but something that big, there's potential for even something like, a small bird to get through. Last thing I mentioned is we do identify attractants. So these are things that are in the environment or on the farm that could be attracting wildlife to the site. The two main attractants for wildlife are food and water. Food is the number one strongest attractant out there. So if there's a source of food, there's likely some sort of wildlife that's going to be utilizing that. We oftentimes see spillage near the feed bins. So that's a pretty extreme example there on the picture on the left, but we do oftentimes see spillage of feed at the feed bin. So that's a major attractant that's bringing wildlife to the area just because of that source of food. Water is the number 2 strongest attractant out there. So we've had a very wet year, lots of rain this year. So we've been seeing a lot of standing water issues. We will identify those as a hazard. We have different tier levels of hazards. We have tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 is the most hazardous, and that is basically where wildlife can get direct access to poultry. So holes in the barns, compromise exclusion, those would be examples of tier 1s. Our attractants like food and water, those are tier 3 attractants. So this isn't all just doom and gloom, and we're seeing bad things out there. Producers are being proactive. We see many folks repairing the hazards that we identify, whether they're putting some expanding foam in some of the holes or adding some sheet metal or adding some wire mesh to some areas. We're seeing producers on the whole are being very productive in their wildlife biosecurity assessment or biosecurity at their farms. We have been at the Peak Convention here the past couple of years, and we just reserved a booth for 2026. So we'll have a booth again this year at the convention. So if you're making it down to that, stop on by our booth. And this is my last slide here. This is my contact information. Dr. Schaefbauer had the same email up there. So again, you can request a wildlife biosecurity assessment at your farm by emailing this email, and you can request a WBA. The other thing you can do is you can contact Wildlife Services directly. So you can give me a call, you can send me an email, take a picture of the screen. I would say I'm the number one, I'm the primary contact for this, but I do have our state director, Gary's contact on there. Just if for some reason, something I'm not getting back to you fast enough, please feel free to reach out to our state director, Gary, and he will pass it on to me too. But give me a call, send me an email, and we'll get out and get you on the schedule and help you. I will say real quick, the one thing that Wildlife Services requires from producers before we can come to a farm is we need written permission from the property owner to be on their property. And that is a work initiation document. So it's a document that I'll create. It will be between the producer and Wildlife Services. I'll sign it and the producer will sign it. It will have a list of species on there. It will have a list of tools that we can use. By signing that, all you're doing is allowing us to be on your property. So that's all I have. So I'll stop sharing here. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take any of those.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Do we have any questions from the group? Oh, we do. In the Q&A, may a producer participate in both the WA and the BIFA? And is there a lot of redundancy between the two, or should they both be conducted? And if so, which is the preferred order to do that?
So Dr. Schaefbauer might have some more insight into this, but it's my understanding that a producer can participate in more than one program. As far as the overlap goes, the WBA, the Wildlife Biosecurity Assessment, we are only looking at hazards on the barns and around the farm or attractants around the farm. So we do not look at any kind of biosecurity plans. We are just looking for wildlife related hazards and issues that we identify on the farm itself or on the barns.
Yep. And so, yeah, so there's not a lot of overlap, except a lot of what you find with the WBA may feed into your plans that go into the B fund. So there may be mitigations that are addressed naturally if you're doing a WBA related to wildlife mitigation and prevention for that section of the tool. But as Jason said, they don't overlap otherwise. Another thing I would want to say is for the BIFA, it's virtual. And Dr. Voss alluded to this too. It really focuses on your plans. And so it's not just that you have a perimeter buffer area. It's how do you maintain that? What signage do you have? And it's not enough to say you have signage in your plan, do you actually have it? Or vice versa, you have it in your plan, but do you actually, and maybe I said the same thing twice, I'm not sure, but it's about both having it in your plan and proving it. And so, yeah, when you sign up for them, you're more than welcome to do them concurrently. They may not feel concurrent because we pass on the WBA to Wildlife Services, and then they work with you to schedule those things. and then you'll be connected to an assessor to do the other audit, and you'll be working with them closely on that. And so the timing of that, may not be concurrent. It just depends. And one thing I do want to say too is for any reimbursements, the max amount of that cost share is for both programs. And so if your, say your inventory says that you could get up to $10,000, well, those mitigations would be related to both programs if you elected to do both.
Excellent. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think we will move on to our last topic of the day with Lindy talking about the new pre-slaughter surveillance.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter. Let me get my slides pulled up and we'll be ready to go. Can you see everything all right?
Not yet. There we go. Yes, we
Okay.
can.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me on. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Lindy Froebel. I am with the National Turkey Federation, and I've been asked to give an overview and provide some perspective related to a recent guidance that USDA put out really about exactly a month ago from today. So really timely conversation. So USDA did put out a guidance which includes recommendation for all meat producing poultry flocks that are located within a state that has had an avian influenza detection. But this guidance is for those producers that are outside of an active control area. So this would be, as an example, you've got a detection in the southeast region of the state. You have your typical 10-kilometer control area, which comes with its own set of required pre-movement testing. This is recommendation for everyone else within the state that is outside of that active control zone. And there are a few pieces to the recommendations. I provided them directly from the website here that lists that one of the recommendations is that there be a pre-movement isolation period during the 72 hours prior to birds moving to slaughter. This is very similar to if you're moving to slaughter in an active control area, really trying to limit those movements on and off the farm before birds move to market. The next component is a recommendation for pre-movement testing in these free areas. So specifically looking at, multi-loadout days, there's a recommendation that there be testing done daily prior to slaughter, and that the not detected negative results should be obtained prior to an initial loadout. They are recommending that the samples for these pre-movement testing be sent for PCR tests, and they do look to have a very similar structure to the testing that is required if you're in a control area. They do note, regardless of any pre-movement slaughter testing, that mortality rate be very carefully monitored, and if you have a mortality spike that exceeds your normal, that there be additional testing. One thing I did want to note is there is a section in the guidance related to indemnity. So this is an optional guidance. This is recommendations. This is not a mandatory policy. And this is not specifically linked to indemnity, but USDA did provide some indemnity reminders specifically around what is eligible for indemnity. So any birds that die prior to you receiving your positive test, those are not eligible for indemnity. That is very much in line with where USDA has been throughout this outbreak and in the policies that they have. They also do clarify that they will not pay for any cost or pay for indemnity should a flock move to market and then later be found to be associated with a positive detection within the flock. And so some additional clarification on their indemnity policy, but not a change to indemnity or a linking of this guidance to indemnity policy. So I wanted to be clear on that. So, how do we get here? How did we get to this recommendation? So, while this may not be the only reason that this guidance was put forward, there has been a lot of pressure to understand how any potential product could be positive for H5N1. There have been now several raw pet food recalls that have occurred where pet food has tested positive for H5N1. Following that detection, the first one that we saw late last year, the FDA did put out new requirements for cat and dog food manufacturers that gave them 90 days to ultimately reassess their food safety plan and determine if H5N1 is a known or reasonably foreseeable hazard, and then make adequate changes to address that hazard if it is identified. There have continued to be some detections of H5N1 in raw pet food. You'll see the AP article that I pulled just this morning shows that the most recent was just a few weeks ago. And so these types of recalls have put a lot of attention on is enough being done to ensure that positive birds do not move to market. I know that there have also been questions from trading partners, et cetera, around how the U.S. is approaching this. And so this led ultimately to an updated guidance as an option for producers who are assessing their risk and wanting to determine if additional pre-slaughter testing is needed. We are working very closely at NTF through our Turkey Health and Welfare Committee as new policies come out, understanding the impacts that it has on the industry and discussing ways to further engage with USDA on the various policies that come out. And so this guidance is no different. Few challenges that we see and have communicated and will continue to communicate on is there really is lacking data to support the guidance recommendations that additional testing pre-slaughter is needed within a whole state just because there's one active control area. We feel very strongly that producers should be prioritizing the management of their risk and identifying if this is the best approach or necessary for them. We also do have concerns that this may be sending mixed signals to trading partners. We very much are appreciative of the strong trade agreements we have, where many countries do restrict on either a county level or even a control zone level. And so providing a mixed message of a whole state needing to act as if it is in a control zone is a concern that we have. Another concern is just lab capacity and bandwidth to be able to receive samples if the entire poultry industry chose to adopt this guidance. When we are in the heart of an outbreak with active cases, there are, weeks and months that labs are running essentially 24/7 to process samples. And so if you are in a prolonged outbreak like we are, there are concerns if labs can truly keep up should industry look to do this sampling as proposed. And then another key point is really resource preservation and prioritization. We certainly believe that it's important to test flocks when there is a concern that birds are showing clinical signs. You see that spike in mortality, but we also want to ensure that resources are spent with the flock and being able to manage the health and monitor the health of birds rather than a diversion of so many resources to test and really not be based on a risk-based approach. So those are some of our high-level concerns that we have. We're still in active conversations with USDA. This is a guidance that is able to be updated as the situation evolves as we learn more, and USDA did note that on the guidance document itself. And so those are my remarks. I have my contact information here. Would love to engage with any of you if you have questions, but I believe we have time for maybe a question or two this afternoon.
Yes, we actually do have one question in the Q&A. Is there any indication of how the infected meat or product is getting into the pet food?
So there are still many active investigations underway. We've been in contact with our colleagues at USDA and at FDA, but at this point they have not released any information regarding any of the outbreaks that I mentioned.
Okay. We are right at 1 o'clock, actually a couple minutes past, but I will give Dr. Schaefbauer an opportunity if she has anything she'd like to add to this conversation.
No, I just want to commend Lindy. She did an excellent job covering it. And the one thing that she mentioned that I would reiterate is that our indemnity policy has not changed, but the idea behind it is that if for some reason a flock is sent to slaughter and later found out that the flock is positive, that the birds that have been slaughtered, those products won't be indemnified. And so that's a really big it's a really big point because if it's taken out of if for some reason the slaughter plant removes it, then that cost is or that money is lost. And so but no, great job, Lindy. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think, it's really important that, we all share the same commitment that we want to identify positive flocks as quickly as possible. There's so many reasons for that. But of course, the goal is to ensure that no product from positive flocks makes it to slaughter.
Yeah, and as Lindy mentioned too, their recommendations, and so that's something to also take away. And I love that MTGA has brought this policy forward as a talking point, and that the National Turkey Federation is also tracking it. And so I think as members that you all should be really proud that they're just kind of keeping the finger on the pulse of things. So it's a recommendation at this point. And so, but I think it's good for us to continue to be informed about it because it was a pilot back in January. And so this was a pilot and now it's kind of, gone broader as a recommendation, but it's not a policy as of now.
We do have a question going back to the audits and the max reimbursement. And you had mentioned it's linked to inventory. So is there a formula that a producer can use to kind of get an idea of what their max reimbursement would be?
Yes. So if you don't mind me, I can so you can find it on the website, but I did, and I should have, I did put it in my slide deck. And I'm just going to share really quickly. Um, um, so you can see here, it's based on, if you're a commercial table egg layer versus meat turkey, and then your number of birds. And so this table is on that website, and I'm happy to work with uh, Pete to make sure this information is provided to you guys in a way that you can um, use it. But yeah, this is the table that's being used.
All right. Well, we have gone over about 5 minutes, so I appreciate everyone hanging on. Like I said, this webinar was recorded, so for our members, it will be posted to our YouTube page and then linked in our members only section. So you'll have a chance to review it. I will also send it out in our next wingtips. So when you get that, you'll be able to get the link and watch it again for review. We covered a lot of information today. We will continue these on into next month, and we'll probably take a break in November, but we will have one in October, and I will be sending out the details shortly on that webinar. And with that, I want to thank all of our presenters and everyone that joined today. Have a good day.